Hi, everyone. Welcome to Congresswoman Susie Lee's Town Hall. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Quinn Fisher, and I will be facilitating tonight's conversation. In addition to the Congresswoman, we are joined by Governor Martin O'Malley, former mayor of Baltimore, former governor of Maryland, and most recently Commissioner of the Social Security Administration, and Nikki McKinney, Policy Director at Center Forward. I'll turn it over to our panelists, who will introduce themselves and give some brief opening remarks. While they give their remarks, feel free to begin submitting your questions via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Congresswoman Lee, I'll kick it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Quinn. Thank you all for taking time today out of your schedule to tune in to hear what's happening in Washington. I represent Nevada's 3rd congressional district. I'm in my 4th term. This is an area of Las Vegas that ranges from Summerlin all the way down to Laughlin, Silverado Ranch, Enterprise, Spring Valley, anything west of the I-15, but it's a diverse district and one that I'm very proud to represent. Listen, these are unprecedented times, and I know many of you here are here today because you're concerned about what you're seeing in this country, whether it is an attack on our Constitution. You're hearing about this bill that was passed in the middle of the night and the rollback on Medicaid and SNAP and benefits that support working families. And many of you still remain concerned about the cost of living, how you're making sure you're going to get your hard-earned Social Security benefits, the attacks on our healthcare system. I have choice words for the bill that was passed, and it's not beautiful. But we will get more into that, and I'm sure there will be some questions about that. As Quinn said, we have 2 esteemed guests with us today. Governor Martin O'Malley, former commissioner of the Social Security Administration, and Nikki McKinney, who is with Democracy Forward on the front lines, fighting the legal battles and making sure we are defending our democracy here in this country. Before we get into everything, again, the Q&A is open. Please feel free to start submitting your questions. We also have some additional questions from people who couldn't be here today, and Quinn will be asking some of those on behalf of those people who are not here. Once we get your questions, Quinn will call on you to unmute you so that you can ask your question live. And please, in deference to everyone, let's try to limit it to at least 1 minute. And know that no matter what's going on here, though, that my work doesn't stop and neither does my team's. We're always here to help you on issues that are affecting you. And in fact, since coming to Congress, my staff has helped over 8,600 Nevadans and small businesses get federal benefits that they've earned. Not to mention, we've returned more than $35 million to families, veterans, seniors, and small businesses. And we've been able to secure over $5.1 billion in local grants and federal investments for Southern Nevada. But this isn't really about the past. We're talking about the future. And I am very generally a very optimistic person, but my message to Nevada is buckle up because we are in for a bumpy ride. Between the impact of tariffs, the drop in international visitors affecting our tourism economy, the rollback of investments in solar energy, Nevada, prior to the passage of this bill, was on the forefront of leading the transition in clean energy and diversifying our economy. That is all being rolled back. The attacks on healthcare and even more. Nevada will struggle for the next few years. And this recent bill literally is taking a sledgehammer to the local economy. And I voted against the bill primarily because it includes the largest cuts to healthcare coverage in U.S. history, increased energy prices, cuts jobs, strips away food assistance for hungry kids and seniors, and adds trillions of dollars to our national debt. And the whole purpose of this was literally so the Trump administration could turn around and give the largest tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans. And it would have only taken 4 Republicans in the House to block this, to have the courage to stand up for working Americans. But instead, they voted to wage a war against Nevadans' health care, their jobs, and our economy. This doesn't even scratch the surface of the full impacts of this reconciliation bill and what it will have on Nevada. But we'll get into that. I'm sure there will be some questions from all of you. And as a reminder, you can always submit a question in the Q&A, and our panelists and I are looking forward to answering those questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Governor Martin O'Malley.
Congresswoman Lee, thank you very much. Thank you for your leadership. I had the honor to lead the men and women of the Social Security Administration at the end of the Biden administration. And I really want to thank you for your courage in standing up. Maybe some of your constituents don't appreciate it, but you have an assignment on the most important committee in the House, and that is appropriations. And I know you remember that hot summer day when Chairman Adderholt and Chairman Cole decided that it was time to cut Social Security by $500 million. But you stood up. You said, wait a minute, time out. This agency's already been reduced to a 50-year low. We're serving more people, more Americans, beneficiaries, and you're younger than I am, baby boomers like me, than ever before with a new record high. Why would we want to cut Social Security staffing when they're already struggling to serve ever-growing numbers of beneficiaries? And yet, that's what they did. But you, Steny Hoyer from Maryland, and by the way, I'm zooming in from Baltimore, Maryland, land of the free, home of the brave, and some others called them out on that, said thank you for defending Social Security in the past, and Social Security really needs you now. Ben has one slide that he's kindly agreed to put up here in my 3 minutes, which I think will tell all of the people that you work and fight so hard for what the true state of Social Security is and why these cuts, effectuated by the chainsaw of Elon Musk and Doge with the green light from the Trump administration, why it is that they're seeing longer wait times on the 1-800 number, why it is that it's taking them longer to get their applications, whether it's for disability or retirement, process, because Social Security is a big insurance company, that all of us pay into. Well, it's also the only agency that runs a $2.6 trillion surplus, which was intentionally built up in the wisdom of Congress to cover these baby boomer years. But let me walk through this graph in a second, because once you see this, I hope your constituents and the people you work for can return to their own tables of democracy and let people know what's really going on here. So that blue graph, kind of the blue-gray thing moving up there is us. It's we the people. That's beneficiaries, people in active pay status. Social Security has never missed a single benefit payment in 90 years. In fact, this year is the birth date, 90 years. Even through the pandemic, never missed a payment. But that red line is what happens when staffing is reduced year over year over year. So-called level funding in an agency that's all staff and some IT means that you postpone IT modernization and you let the grim reaper of attrition wipe out your staff, which then means for your people in Las Vegas and the field offices all around your district and southwestern Las Vegas, it's longer wait times, longer hold times. So when I was there, the agency was already at a 50-year low in staffing. That precipitous decline that you see there on the graph, that's the Doge cuts. They actually paid the already depleted staff at Social Security, paid them with your money to quit. That's what they did. They used your money to pay people that were retirement eligible for the entire year to quit. So if you want to look for waste, fraud, and abuse at Social Security, it's not in the agency itself. The agency operates on less than 1% overhead to benefits paid, which compared to Allstate at 19% or Liberty Mutual is a real efficiency. The waste and fraud and abuse that's happened is driving people out of the agency and making the wait times for your people go up, up, up. Ben, you can take off the slide. Let me conclude with this. While Social Security has never seen a benefit interruption before, we're in danger of seeing a benefit interruption now. I've never hoped so much to be wrong about anything, Congresswoman, as I am of this. But you cannot take a chainsaw and cut in half the IT staffing, those people that make sure that the 73 million checks go out every month, and not have it eventually break down. I'm kind of surprised they've kept it together thus far. I think that's a tribute to the courageous people that have stayed there. But as you said yourself, this is a time to buckle up. What this latest bill, the Bankrupting America bill, has done to undercut institutions that people relied upon, like Social Security and others, is really appalling. And I thank you so much for fighting for us, for all of us, regardless of party. I think what's happening right now would make Abraham Lincoln roll over in his grave. But hopefully, with your leadership, we'll see better days.
So I think the Congresswoman was on mute, but I think I was reading your lips, and I think it is my turn. Um, Thank you so much, Congresswoman Lee, for the invitation to join you and the good folks of Nevada's 3rd Congressional District this evening. My name is Nikki McKinney, and I'm the policy director at an organization called Democracy Forward. If you've never heard of Democracy Forward, do not worry. We are a relatively new organization in Washington, D.C. We were formed by a small group of litigators in 2016 who were really worried about the threat to democracy and the rule of law during the first Trump administration. And we continue the mission of ensuring that we push back on authoritarianism and those who would undermine the rule of law in our country. It has been 6 months since President Trump's inauguration, and Democracy Forward and a whole host of other civil society organizations with whom we partner have really been on the front lines of holding the administration accountable in the courts. We are filing litigation nearly every day, and we are winning on behalf of our plaintiffs, which include unions, nonprofit organizations, veterans serving organizations, houses of worship, and more. Since the inauguration, there have been more than 335 lawsuits filed. Let me say that again. Since President Trump was inaugurated 6 months ago, there have been 335 lawsuits filed. One of the things that I think you, Congresswoman, and probably you, Governor O'Malley, hear a lot is, where is the fight? Where is the pushback? Well, it's happening in the halls of Congress, thanks to folks like Congresswoman Lee, but it's also happening in the streets, thanks to the constituents who are on this call, and it is happening in the courthouses, thanks to litigators like the ones I work with each and every day. So 335 lawsuits have been filed. Of that number, Democracy Forward is responsible for more than 70 of those. In addition to those 70 lawsuits, we have launched over 90 investigations and submitted a number of FOIA requests, or Freedom of Information Act requests, to the executive branch seeking information to ensure that the American people understand and have insight into some of the actions of the Trump administration. In court, I just want to give you a little bit of a flavor of some of the cases before we turn over to questions. We have challenged the abrupt discontinuation of funding the very first week. Many of you may remember the Trump administration issued a memo that said they were going to freeze most discretionary funding, which meant that a number of nonprofit organizations weren't going to see funding that helped them deliver meals to individuals with disabilities, to provide services to the elderly, to provide food and clothing to those who are experiencing homelessness, and a host of other organizations. So we were in court within 24 hours of the issuance of that memo and received and won the first nationwide preliminary injunction, which meant that those federal dollars could continue to go out the door. We have filed cases against DOGE, where they have tried to steal your Social Security Administration data for nefarious purposes, attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and targeting our nation's nonpartisan civil service. I really appreciate Governor how eloquently talked about the brave men and women who are at the Social Security Administration. And so that folks know we are winning. The courts aren't going to save us on everything, but we are in court and we are winning, stopping or pausing some of the administration's activities while the courts review the merits of our cases. I want to be clear that in the more than 300 cases I've talked about, the administration has rarely won on the merits of the case, less than a handful of times. Now, they're going to continue to win, but I promise you, so are we. So, with that, I'm going to turn things back over to you, Congresswoman Lee, and happy to answer any questions about any of our litigation and that of our partner organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now our panelists will take questions from all the attendees here tonight. Again, to ask a question, click the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and type in your question for the panelists. When we get to your question, I will call your name and unmute you so you can ask your question live directly to the panel. If you wish to ask a question but don't want to be called on live, please just note that when you submit your question. And of course, many of you submitted questions when you register for the town hall, so we will get to some of those as well. And out of respect for other attendees, please try to keep your questions brief so that we can get to as many as possible in the time we have. With that, our first question is from Diane C., who had a question about Social Security solvency. And Diane, if you click unmute, you should be able to ask your question live now.
Yes, my question for the Congresswoman is, what are you doing to make sure Social Security will be solvent in the future?
Thank you. Well, listen, thanks for that question. First of all, I want to talk about making sure we protect Social Security. What is happening by this administration is truly an attempt to tear apart the Social Security Administration and pave the way for privatizing Social Security. And I have one answer to that, and that is to preserve the benefits that we have paid into, that you have earned and paid into Social Security for your future. And so, one thing about this reconciliation bill, the BBB bill that was passed, adding $3.3 trillion to our deficit, does nothing to help us when it comes to looking through the solvency of this country. And so we're going to continue to fight to preserve the benefits of Social Security. I'm going to turn it over to Martin O'Malley, who will talk about the future solvency and what we see about that moving forward.
Congresswoman, thank you. Yeah, there's two really important issues on the horizon of Social Security. One of them is the long-term, solvency, and we've all been reading the articles because it always gets great clicks when they say Social Security to go bankrupt in 2033. It's not exactly true, but it gets a lot of clicks. It's a solvable problem. It's a solvable problem. The second one, though, is the more immediate one, which is the way their gutting of the agency and its staffing threatens to interrupt your benefits. But let's talk to the call of your question about the solvency. Oftentimes when we see these articles about Social Security going bankrupt, even the Washington Post, God bless their hearts, when the latest audit came out, the headline was Social Security to go run totally dry by 2033. It's not true, but it makes for an inflammatory headline. What they're talking about is actually the surplus reserve that was built up in the hopes of it covering the retirement lifespans of us baby boomers, people of my age bracket. And that is being depleted sooner than people thought back in 1982 when Congress last made the adjustment. But the reason it's being depleted is a totally solvable problem. You see, what happened after the last adjustment in 1982 is changes to the income tax occurred that accelerated, exacerbated the problem of income inequality, and therefore took anticipated income that people thought in 1982 in Congress would be paid into Social Security, and instead took it out of the bracket to which Social Security applies because it concentrated wealth in the hands of the top 6%. What that means, in effect, in conclusion here, is that if you're a family of four and you make $170,000, which is a lot. Most of us don't make $170,000. You stop paying into Social Security once you reach 170,000, which means you pay like 10,000 into Social Security. But get this, if you are a single multimillionaire that makes 170 million, you still only pay into Social Security that same 10,000 that a family of four, because we only tax, we only income up to 170,000 is has Social Security applied to it. So every year in Congress, there are bills that are submitted both in the House and the Senate that seeks to solve this solvable problem by asking people that make a lot more to continue to pay into Social Security. And that is the crux, the biggest part of extending solvency into the next 75 years. But even if Congress weren't taxed by 2033, the truth is Social Security would still be able to pay 83% of benefits. Again, this is a solvable problem, and it's one that your Congresswoman fights hard to try to bring people to address, because it's better to do it sooner rather than later. Hope that helps.
Our next question is from Thomas Wright, who has a question about education and funding for special ed programs. Thomas, if you unmute, you should be able to ask your question live. Thomas, we can't hear you, so we will try to come back to you later. Our next question is from Dale M., who has a question about executive orders and the courts. Dale, you should be able to ask your question live.
Yes, hi. I was just wondering, all of these executive orders that the current president is using to rule America, many of them are borderline or outright illegal and unconstitutional. Isn't there anything we, the people, can do to block these? I mean, even the courts are being ignored.
Thank you. That is an incredibly important question, something that keeps us all up at night, including myself. I'll say this, when I think about what our response is to the attacks on our Constitution and our democracy, I look at our response out of three lenses. One, legislatively. We can pass legislation that continues to safeguard our protections. The problem is that we have a Republican-controlled House and Senate, and of course, the presidency. And it seems that many of them are allowing the president to do whatever he wants. And so, as a member of the Democratic Party, I'll continue to fight to make sure that we get back into the majority in 2026. But, in the meantime, we have two other avenues. One is through advocacy and activism, and, making sure not just in my district, but in districts all across the country, in districts of Republican House and Senate members, that they're understanding that their constituents are not standing for this type of attack on our democracy. And that is having an impact. I know people feel like they're screaming into the air, but it does have an impact. And then the third, I call it the third leg of the stool, is legally. And I'm going to turn it over to Nikki, who is leading Democracy Forward, is the forefront organization filing lawsuits and fighting into the courts and making sure we are holding this administration accountable and protecting our Constitution. So I'll turn it over to Nikki, and she'll give you an idea of what's happening in the courts when it comes to these executive orders.
Really appreciate the question, and I note the frustration in your voice, sir. For folks who, I keep talking about this number of cases. For folks who want to see a screenshot of the totality of those cases, to see where we are in court every day, not just Democracy Forward, but everywhere, There's a really fantastic tracker on a website called Just Security. That's JUST Security. And you can see cases filed by executive action and by executive order. And you'll be hard pressed to find an executive order that that we believe is facially unconstitutional or that violates individual civil rights or civil liberties where there isn't a case filed against them, and in some instances, multiple. And that's important because the strategy that existed prior was that organizations would get together and one organization would file a case. We don't have the luxury of doing that anymore. We have to be strategic, but we are filing in districts where we think we can get preliminary injunctions to stop or pause the president's action. But sir, you've hit the nail on the head in that we are getting up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is granting a government stay of a pause or a temporary restraining order or preliminary injunction. What they have not yet done in most of these cases is decided on the merits. So there is still hope. So while in many instances the Supreme Court has overruled the lower courts and removed those preliminary injunctions or temporary restraining orders, they haven't yet ruled on the merits of the case. So we're still fighting in court and making the case that what the government has done is illegal and unconstitutional. And so while we're fighting in court, to the Congresswoman's point, what's really important for folks on this call to do is to be continuing to advocate and have your voices heard in the executive branch, in the press, with other members of Congress, to let them know how those executive orders, because the president and the long game that I think the Republican Party played in stacking the court and stacking Article 3 judicial seats, is a lesson I think we've got to learn in the future. With that, I'll turn things back over to you, Congresswoman.
We are going to try to go back to Thomas for his question about education. Thomas, you should be able to unmute and ask your question now.
How's that? Hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for taking my call, Congresswoman Lee. So with school starting in about 3 weeks, and we understand that they are dismantling the Department of Education, I'm wondering, what is the future of special education in Clark County School District with regard to related services, specifically occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy?
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. That is an important question. You know, we have 70,000 students in the Clark County School District with disabilities. And, you know, when I think about this effort to dismantle the Department of Education, to me, students with disabilities are the most vulnerable students with respect to that, especially when it comes to K to 12. You know, the Department of Education primarily regulates and oversees a lot of higher ed, deals with a lot of Pell Grants and student loans, et cetera. But when it comes to K to 12 education, the Office of Civil Rights and making sure that we're protecting the rights of all students is a key component of what the Department of Education does. And so when they roll back or dismantle and try to send some of the duties of the Department of Education, maybe to the Department of Labor, you know, I believe that that responsibility of protecting the rights of students with disabilities is going to fall on the state of Nevada. And so, you know, it's to be seen how that will play out. But, you know, we just saw today, I just had a press conference. The administration just announced they were withholding $30 million of funds from the Clark County School District. These are funds that go to Title I schools that affect our most vulnerable students. I believe because of our advocacy, like it does work, that those funds are going to be unfrozen. But what it leads is to a lot of uncertainty. And, we got to be hiring aides and hiring teachers. And so I'm just going to say I don't have a great answer for you because this is unprecedented times. But we are going to be watching the school district and, of course, the state. And I do believe that a lot of these responsibilities that traditionally would have been covered by the Department of Education will now become a responsibility of the state of Nevada. And so it does put a lot of our students with disabilities at much higher risk than they were before. I mean, that was a key component of what the Department of Education did. It's really scary times for those 70,000 students.
Our next question is from Lydia Edwards, who has a question about public lands. Lydia, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Hi. Thank you, Susie Lee, for working so hard for us. My question was, is this administration seeking to have public lands released for private purchase?
Well, you know what? This is an example of what happened just last week with the passage of this big bill. An amendment was proposed in the middle of the night by Mark Amodei that would have allowed for the sell-off of lands in Nevada, 500,000 acres of land. And we fought it. We fought it at the committee level. And then we had to go work with other members in Congress, not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. And I had to go to every Western member and let them understand what this means when there is a sell-off of public lands with no accountability. And it's very important to Nevada. We have a lands bill that we have operated on that has been a model for how we manage public lands. And of course, Nevada, with close to 80% of our lands federally controlled, whenever we sell off lands, that the proceeds from that comes back to Nevada to be used for conservation and building of roads. Under this proposal, which not only did Mark Amodei put forward, but Senator Mike Lee even went further and proposed selling off 2 million acres of lands in the West. But what we saw was across this country, one, that bipartisanship does exist and does work. Ryan Zinke, who is a Republican member of Congress from Montana, he and I don't agree on much, but we do agree on the value of public lands. And he threatened to tank the whole bill if this provision was included. And then other Republican members joined him and said they would not vote for the bill if there was a sell-off of public lands. The other thing that put pressure on senators was whether you're talking about off-road enthusiasts or hunting enthusiasts, they all used their voices and advocated and activated and put pressure on their members of Congress and their senators to oppose this provision. And so ultimately, the provision was stripped out of this bill, and we will proceed as we have in the past. We still have a lands bill we have to pass, and there still are attempts time and again to sell off forest land for oil development and such, and that is happening. But right now, we effectively fought the blanket sell-off of public lands across the West, and it took a team effort. It was bipartisan, but most importantly, people on the ground made their voices heard and made it impossible for members of Congress to vote for that. And so we were successful in blocking it.
Our next question is from Austin W., who has a question about immigration. Austin, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon, Congressman and panel. So I wanted to make a quick statement. I think immigrants do more for our country than they detract. We are a country of immigrants. They pay into Social Security, and I don't believe they get benefits from that. So I think we need to protect this kind of forcible removal of law-abiding citizens who are here just for asylum. They've not committed any crimes. So, they pay into Social Security and they're not getting benefits from it, and they help our economy, which helps Social Security.
True.
Listen, Austin, what we are seeing on the attacks of not just, Trump came into office and promised that he would deport anyone who was here undocumented who committed a crime. And what we are seeing is our immigrant communities across this country being terrorized. We are seeing people who have not broken crimes or who have not committed crimes being abducted and sent to detention and potentially deported. And Nikki will talk about a few cases that she's working on to do that. What I'm going to say on this is, you know, the Trump administration came in with a pledge to close our borders and deport anyone who is here undocumented committing a crime. We are seeing that this is expanding beyond that, and we are fighting it in the courts, and Nikki will talk about that. But I believe we still have an opportunity for comprehensive immigration reform. And we need to provide a pathway to give people some certainty that they have a pathway to some form of legal status to be here. They may have to pay a penalty. There may be, some consequences if they've, overstayed a visa, et cetera. But we have to fix this system. I just reintroduced the Dignity Act. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation. Both sides of the aisle are not going to be happy about the bill because it's not perfect from either end, but it is a compromise that what it does is provide some dignity and certainty to people who are here, who, like you said, are the backbone of our country. There is no community that represents the power of our immigrant community more than here in Southern Nevada. This is a community that was built with the talent of immigrants and is thriving because of the talents of our immigrant community. And many of them are living in the shadows and living in fear right now. And I'm going to turn it over to Nikki right now to talk about, Austin, what we are doing legally in those cases where where U.S. citizens are being deported, where people are being deported unlawfully. Nikki, I'll turn it over to you.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because I think while this is an immigration issue, certainly what it is at its foundation is an issue related to due process by and large. And due process feels like a constitutional guarantee that we had all become a little bit complacent about, but is now certainly under attack. So here are a few cases that we at Democracy Forward are leading and are working with partner organizations on. Early on, we saw the president load up planes and abduct people. I want to be clear about what happened. They loaded up planes of individuals. They were not even sure about who those individuals were, and they sent them to a foreign gulag. Those individuals remain in prison. And many of them, let me not say that, none of them were afforded due process. The constitutional right that everybody who is walking on American soil has to ensure that there's a process such that if you are removed from this country, you have a day in court. Because that is fundamentally important, particularly because what happened after the fact, once the president himself realized he had illegally removed somebody from this country, he had abducted somebody, then he threw his hands up in the air and said, "There is nothing I can do about it." If that doesn't frighten you, I'm not sure what will scare you. The idea that you could be rounded up by what we are now seeing, masked, unidentified agents proclaiming to be ICE, but you have absolutely no idea, rounding individuals up off the streets without a day in court, without any process, putting them on a plane and sending them to another country. So we were in court with our partners at the ACLU when the president initiated the Alien and Alien Enemies Act to abduct individuals from this country. That is a case that is continuing, that is ongoing, and we know the administration violated the court order because a judge said those planes should not leave, and they left. That should also terrify everybody on this call. But that it doesn't stop there. We are also at Democracy Forward challenging the underlying agreement that facilitated the removal of folks to El Salvador, because your tax dollars are being used right now in an agreement between the State Department and the government of El Salvador to house those individuals. We are paying the government of El Salvador to detain those individuals on our behalf, and not hundreds of thousands of dollars, to the tune of millions of dollars. We are also in court suing the Department of Health and Human Services on some new policies that have resulted in the separation of families and the prolonged detention of children. And a little known policy of the Department of Homeland Security is one around what we call sensitive locations. It had been the policy of the Department of Homeland Security, of ICE, in Republican and Democratic administrations, including during the first Trump administration, that they would not deport individuals or go into what we call sensitive locations. So think houses of worship, your church, your synagogue, your mosque, schools. They would not enter those areas in order to conduct immigration enforcement. And they threw that policy out the window. And now they are terrorizing young children and taking them and deporting them, oftentimes without alerting their parents or anyone. And so they do not know where those young people are. The totality of those cases and several others that our partner organizations are pursuing in court are just an example of the efforts that are underway to make sure that we do a few things that I think everybody on this call can agree on, including the Congresswoman who has been fighting for issues like this since the first day I think she entered Congress, which is we can have a safe border, but we can do so by having a humane immigration policy that does not fundamentally threaten everybody's rights on this call. I think we can do all three of those things together, and that's what we're fighting for in court. Back over to you, Congresswoman.
I do want to talk about just, I sit on the Appropriations Committee. It's not an author, we're not passing bills, we're passing spending bills. But in that committee, we have the opportunity to be able to set some type of policy at times. For instance, it was the first time that we finally were able to pass language that allows for Dreamers to work on Capitol Hill. Believe it or not, that had been prohibited for the past few Congresses. The other thing that we were able to pass as part of the Homeland Security bill was language that will ensure or will move to make sure that there is some form of identification on ICE agents. We have seen across this country where agents are abducting people. Some people maybe are even posing as agents without identification. Our law enforcement officers, every one of them have some form of identification. So we put some language in there. Of course, it's got to pass the Senate, et cetera. But we're trying to, every chance we get, to, on the legislative side, put in language and pass legislation to chip away and make sure we are protecting people's constitutional rights.
Could I add one thing there, Congresswoman? Yeah. I mean, the initial question was about immigrants contributing also to Social Security. That's true. One of the big lies that Elon Musk and Donald Trump have been pushing in order to damage the reputation of Social Security in the eyes of enough Americans is that illegal immigrants are driving Social Security bankrupt. Absolutely, positively untrue, false. In point of fact, illegal immigrants, so-called people working here, human beings working here outside of legal status, contribute $26 billion to the rest of us into Social Security, of which they will never see a dime.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is from Lachelle Washington, who has a question on how to get help with an issue with the Social Security Administration. Lachelle, you should be able to unmute and ask your question now.
Hello, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm having an issue with an overpayment. I was contacted last year, kind of out of the blue, and they said I was entitled to my husband's benefits in addition to my benefits. This was November, December, and then in January, I got a lump payment. I got payments for February, and then in April, I got a letter saying I was not entitled to these benefits and that, I owed Social Security all the money it had paid me. So I really don't know what to do. I'm going through, I've submitted paperwork and documents, financials for the appeal process, but I'm just really at a loss at this point. Especially since I didn't initiate the contact. They
Right. Yeah. Michelle, I mean, this is an issue that my mother unfortunately suffered as well, where she received benefits and then 6 months later received a letter that said, I have to pay the benefits back. I will say this, you can certainly call my office, 702-963-9336. We have caseworkers that can help you navigate a Social Security and see what we can do to help you get some relief on this. I don't know, Martin, if you have any other suggestions, but we can certainly help you. I mean, it's something that is so stressful that you've received the money, you've spent the money, now they say, oh, wait, you owe us the money back. But we can certainly take on this case and help you out from our office's point of view.
Yeah, that's really important, and you're lucky. I mean, the Congressman, the fact that you're on appropriations and you can fight for her on this, I mean, you got to fight your way into these overwhelmed Social Security offices. They're driving people in there for business we used to be able to effectuate online and automatically. It almost seems to be a concerted effort to destroy customer service in order to sour people against the agency. And those overpayments, when you have staff that's been reduced by Elon Musk now to a 1966 low, it takes longer to catch up with the mistakes when they make them. So it's not that they're trying to be cruel, but you fighting for her and getting her the attention is the best thing that can be done. When I was there in a bipartisan Republican and Democratic way, you'll remember this, all of your members wanted me to stop the 100% clawback when there's an overpayment and people can't, get an appointment to come back in. We used to intercept 100% of your monthly benefit. I put a stop to that because you and your Republican and Democratic colleagues demanded that I do it. Sadly, these guys, when they came in, reversed that in order to punish people for mistakes that weren't theirs. It's now gone back to 50%. But the bottom line is you need to fight to get into that aperture of the good people who are still at Social Security in order to help make it right. And I know your office has the contacts of the good people still there to do that.
Yeah. Give us a call. We'll help you out.
Our next question is from Tim Wenzel, who has a question about Yucca Mountain. Tim, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. So it's known that AI consumes a tremendous amount of energy, and there's talk of reactivating nuclear power plants like 3 Mile Island. So I'm wondering, how fearful should Nevadans be about the Trump regime opening Yucca Mountain?
Thank you for that question. I serve on the Energy and Water Subcommittee of Appropriations, and I affectionately call it the Anti-Yucca Mountain Subcommittee, because this is the committee that every year someone tries to insert some form of language that could potentially open up, the development of Yucca Mountain. I will say this, that from this administration and what we have seen, that Yucca Mountain is dead. I have worked with both members of both parties. I'm work closely with Chuck Fleischman, who is the chairman of the Energy and Water Subcommittee. He represents Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which has a lot of legacy nuclear waste. So they are very intent on finding a solution for nuclear waste across this country. I work with the Nuclear Waste Society. I am at the table every step of the way because we do have a nuclear waste problem in this country. And yes, we are turning to next generation nuclear reactors, which, by the way, produce a significantly less nuclear waste than the old school reactors of the past. But there is still waste, and we still do have a problem. Right now, we have site-based. We are pushing for consent-based siting, meaning that the Department of Energy cannot put a repository anywhere unless a community agrees to and gives permission for that repository to go forward. There are some communities in Texas and New Mexico who are looking at this, but you are correct. It's never dead. People always think across this country that they've sunk so much money into Yucca Mountain, like, why don't we just continue? And the reason we don't continue is because, one, it's not safe. And two, it's not safe on our roads, and it's not safe on our train tracks. And Nevada has made clear time and again that we do not want to be the nation's nuclear waste dumping ground. And so that's why I make a point to always be at the table, because you can be a brick, you can be a brick wall to something, but unless you have an alternative, people are always going to look at Yucca Mountain as a potential alternative. So we are, working collectively to try to find whether it is another site or alternative ways of disposal or reuse to deal with our country's nuclear waste issue.
We are at the hour mark, so unfortunately that's going to have to be our last question for tonight. There were a lot of questions that we didn't get to tonight. You're always welcome to call or email our office with your questions for Congresswoman Lee. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I will turn it back over to the Congresswoman for a brief conclusion.
Well, listen, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. I wish we could have more time. And if you did submit a question, we can email you a response. If you put your email with the question, we'll definitely get that, or email my office. We certainly are open, or call to answering any questions you have. These are, like I said, this is unprecedented time, whether you are talking about the types of attacks on our Constitution that Nikki and her organization are fighting, whether you are dealing with the uncertainty surrounding Social Security, with the firing and the early retirement of Social Security employees, and people wondering how they're going to get through and get the questions answered. And then you're looking at what's happening with the passage of this big bill that affects our Medicaid, affects SNAP benefits, gives the wealthiest Americans tax breaks, whereas hardworking Americans like those in Nevada get little crumbs of tax breaks. And by the way, many of those are temporary. But it's riding on, we're going to see increased healthcare premiums. We are going to see increased energy costs. So we're in for a bumpy ride, but you got to know that you have people that are here fighting every step of the way, because we know that, whatever this administration's throwing at us, we're going to stand firm and make sure we fight for hardworking Americans. And so we're going to continue to do this. I just want to briefly give the governor and Nikki a chance to say brief closing remarks, but I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and please don't ever hesitate to call my office again, 963-933-9336. If you have a question, you don't know where to turn, call us. If we don't have the answer, we're going to put you in the right direction and get you to where you need to go. We've been incredibly effective at helping over 8,600 people who have called our office, returning over $35 million to them, including, by the way, Michelle, people who did have overpayment requests. We have helped them as well. So we'll continue to do that. And again, thank you all for tuning in. And Governor, I'll give you a quick minute to say.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Congresswoman. Thanks for fighting for us and for the republic we carry in our hearts. Really, really honored to be on this with you. Thanks for serving our country.
All right. And thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. Couldn't have said it any better. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.